Hello, I'm Brandy Agerbeck of LooseTooth.com, and I want to share with you a very straightforward but delightful project that you can do with stuff you have in your home. Given that at this moment that I'm recording this video in late March 2020, a whole lot of us are stuck at home for very, very good reason. So I want to show you how to make this kind of collage, this kind of whatever you want to call it. You can call it capital A art, you can call it lower A art, you could call it craft, you can call it whatever you want. But I find it to be a very simple, very delightful project that takes very, very simple materials. And I want to show you what my inspiration was. Years and years and years ago, I was doing one of my favorite things, which is perusing the stacks in a library, just looking, go into some certain section on a topic I'm interested in and just, look at different titles, pull out different books, and see what there is to discover as a tried and true library nerd. And there was a book that I think the very first one that I saw was actually this book. A series of books called Creative Play Series. This one in particular was Creative Drawing, Point and Line. And I believe these all started in German classrooms. That's my impression. I haven't looked this up recently, so we're going to go with that. And, I love this. We've got the property of the Pikesville Junior High. I think it says Baltimore County, so that's where this book used to live. Ernst Rutger, R-O umlaut T-T-G-E-R. That's the name most commonly the series is attributed to. But if you look for Creative Play Series, maybe you look for this publisher, Van Nostrand Reinhold Company. You're not going to find these in print anymore. Look for them at your libraries. If you don't know, there's worldcat.org, and that's like the worldwide card catalog. So you can always look for a book there and see how many miles away you can find a copy. These particular copies I found used, and now I've got, I don't know if I got all of them, but there's a whole heck of a lot of them. So this is Creative Drawing, Point and Line, and it's basically, kids, it's school kids making different drawings, and usually there's some kind of prompt on page that kind of tells you what kind of general guidance the kids were given. But I find these books so stinking inspirational. Like, they're so darn inspiring. Like, look at these freaking animals. They're just the most beautiful thing ever, aren't they? Like, look at that. Come on. So there's a whole series of them. There's a wood one, a metal one, corrugated cardboard one, clay, all sorts of good stuff. But this particular exercise came out of this one, which is Creative Paper Design. Again, Creative Play Series. Here it says Ernst Rutger again, and then we've got Reinhold Press. And I want to show you here, so very beginning of the book, we've got this idea or this project or this direction of splitting an area into sections. And I just want to show you quickly that, and here we've got, share this quickly. The child's natural urge to play takes two distinct forms: aimless play, which leads merely to tears and quarrels. I don't know if I agree with that. And serious play, which always follows a pattern of some kind, even though the child may not be aware of it. That's a whole nother pedagogical discussion. But here in the first steps of this particular book, it talks about splitting an area into sections. And that's exactly what I did here. Was I took this great ovally kind of shape and split it into sections and glued them onto a surface. And this particular page has, how to start from a rectangle. So there's all sorts of fantastic examples of that. And these great images. So starting from a triangle, here we've got starting from a circle. And all of these are by taking a shape and cutting it. Like, these are all physically cut pieces of paper. And the biggest thing in these examples, part of what I think is really beautiful and appealing, is high contrast these happen to be. So you get a great sense of the shape because you've got the paper that's being cut is black, the surface it is going onto is white, and so it's got this great graphic quality. So I want to demonstrate how simple it is to make one of these, to encourage you to make one. And this is one I made earlier on a Zoom call with friends. So let me just quickly show you what you need to make this this kind of collage. This is actually a pizza box, a gluten-free pizza box. Great brand for gluten-free stuff, against the grain. But I use a pizza box. So first things first, cull your space. I wouldn't take any new food out of its packaging, but as you eat, as you consume things, just collect paper you already have. That can be the insides of boxes. In my experience, usually the insides of boxes are blank. Sometimes the cereal box will have like different games and stuff inside, but generally the inside of a box is blank. Perfectly usable paper or cardboard. You can take the labels off of cans. Those are kind of the biggies, boxes and can labels, but certainly just be aware of what is something that is considered waste that you can turn into something awesome. So I'm going to use another pizza box. So this is my pizza. I'm going to use my husband's pizza box from a couple nights ago to make this second demonstration. So you're going to need a box of some sort. You are going to need some kind of paint or ink. In this case, I'm using this permanent ink from Neuland. This is what I use in my markers when I'm making big drawings for folks for a living. And this is a permanent black. So it's just a really nice flat black. Because again, I want to play with the contrast in this particular demo, like the last one you saw. And doesn't have to be ink, doesn't have to be permanent, as long as you're not getting what you're making too wet. Doesn't have to be, it could be paint, it could be kind of anything. I mean, even if you had like spray paint, though, you know, make sure you got good ventilation. The main thing here is we're taking the base box and using one side and coloring it a color, and then we're using the other side as the thing we're gluing our shape onto. So I've got this nice, beautiful permanent black ink. I've got just this beautifully grubby old brush. I love seeing how old my supplies are. I'm sure this brush is more than 20 years old and it's still working. And I love it. It's got this nice soft big brush, so I can coat my box, the inside of my box, with the ink really beautifully. This doesn't have to be perfect. You can use markers. I just happen to like, you know, the feeling of getting that nice even coat with the ink. Use whatever. Just use whatever turns that box into a different color. That's it. And a pair of scissors. I've got this bowl here just to put my ink in so I can brush it on. And you're going to need some kind of glue. I am a big fan of Aleene's tacky glue. And pro tip, this is pretty darn simple, but if you are using glue that isn't super full, I actually just keep it, I store it tip down so I don't have to wait for gravity to work. This bottle's probably full to about there. So I'm able to grab my glue and use it right away. So that's what you need. And it is pretty darn freaking simple. Oh, here's my box. So here is the Supreme Thin Crust Pizza from Whole Foods. And very simply, the first thing I'm going to do is cut the box apart. I'm not getting too precious with this. Not worrying too much about this. And I'll wrestle the rest of this box later, but I just want to show you what we want to do to coat that piece of paper. And you know what? If you're like, I already know how to put some color on a piece of cardboard, you can skip this. That's fine. But we're going to take this flat piece of paper, we're going to coat it with ink, and if you want to watch, you can watch, because, I don't know, I think it's kind of cool. So I'm using the little dropper in my Neuland, the bulb, that this is the way the Neuland inks work for their markers. Here we've got a little needle that goes into the marker. In this case, we're not filling up a marker, so I'm just going to gently press the bulb of this ink and put it in my bowl. Now I'm going to take that ink and brush it onto the piece of paper. Now this square from my box is going to be the same size as the other square, and as you saw in this shape, you're going to need some space. You don't need to coat this entire piece of paper, because as you cut it up into whatever shape you want to cut it up into, you need some negative space, these spaces between the pieces, to give you this great kind of graphic pattern. So I don't want to go to the corners of this piece of paper. I just don't need to. You could also just paint the whole darn thing and then use some of that for some other project later. But look at that gorgeous shiny black ink. So just super simply going through and coating this piece of paper, this piece of very lightweight cardboard. I just love this. I love freaking working with my hands. And let's see how much more ink we have here. I guess I'll just use what I squirted out of my bottle. Why not, right? I can always use this nice deep black ink for some kind of collage later. And even here, I'm kind of running out of ink in that corner. Maybe I'll cut that up and do something interesting with the texture there. So I think there's a whole lot of times when people are making anything, there's a whole lot of pressure on yourself that it has to be perfect, it has to be good. You know, you might go, well, I didn't have enough ink. Well, you got plenty of ink, you're fine. So, you know, please let these kind of projects be an exercise in self-compassion. And I think some of you, let me back up a second, say some of you are thinking, oh great, I'll show this project to my kids. And your kids are more than welcome to do this project, but I would love it if you did this project too, because making stuff feels good. And this is a very low risk project that I highly recommend. So now I'm just going to turn off my camera for a few minutes and let this piece of cardboard dry completely. You're going to have a much better project if you just give yourself some patience, let this sit and dry completely before you come back and cut it into all sorts of gorgeous pieces. And we're back. So now I've got this nice, dry, shiny, inky piece of pizza box, and I cut out the second piece of pizza box. And I noticed I got a couple itty bitty stains on this on the edges here, so I am going to probably cut it down to be a smaller collage than using the whole space, because I don't really like the greasy pizza stains. Call me crazy. Now, if you're just doing this to have fun, you don't, do whatever you want to do. That's just pointing that out in case you could pick that up on the screen. You thought, pizza box, yuck. So now I want to take my nice high contrast black inked piece of paper, piece of chipboard, piece of cardboard, and cut it into a shape. As you saw in the book, you could start with a rectangle, you could start with a triangle, you could start with a circle, you can start with whatever you want. I was actually really had a nice time with that oval-y kind of shape, so I'm just going to do that again because I can. So I am just winging it here. Now, yes, I cut things out of paper all the frickin' time. So I got some shapes I know I like, but do whatever you like, This is not... It's funny, I read that quote about aimless play versus serious play, and I don't know. I think there's a lot to be said for not so serious play. So now I've got this shape, and I really like the shape, but as you can see, it takes up a lot of space. It takes up a lot of space on this piece of paper. So I don't really have... Now I can keep it this size and kind of explode out the shapes by cutting up the sections and gluing them down in a different configuration. And I would personally, I don't feel like I'd have enough white space around the shape. So I think I'm going to cut this piece down a little bit more. And there's no right answer on this kind of project. It simply is, let's see what we got. Let's play with these shapes. So now I took out that piece. So now you can see we're getting a little more white space around that. And I think I'm going to, no, I'm going to go smaller even. This is real-time decision making on a document camera. All right, let's do that. That looks good. All right. So now, again, no right way, no wrong way. I'm just going to cut this. I'm going to start with, the solid shape and cut it apart. And I like the same kind of curvy lines I had on the last one. So I'm going to start with sort of those kinds of shapes. So you can see how I got the kind of image you saw at the beginning of the video. So here, I'm just deciding to do, as I go, what kind of shapes do I want to cut out? Okay. I think I'll go like this. Instead of doing the same kind of shape, I'm going to do that kind of shape and that kind of shape. And I do find it useful to kind of set down the shapes as you go. So, you know, it's not the world's most difficult puzzle here. So it isn't as if you're going to have so many pieces you need to figure out. But that is useful. I found it useful when I did this before. So I'm going to do it again. So again, I'm just working to cut my pieces down. My camera looked like it lagged a little bit. I'm not sure if that's coming through, but we're going to go like that. And let's try this. We're gonna. So what I'm doing here is I tend to really love symmetry. So I'm trying to do things a little bit differently than I normally would, and not make everything so even. So for friends who know me or are watching this, they're gonna be like, "What is she doing?" I'm like, "I know, it's not symmetrical." Now here's something that I just noticed. That first, what I wanted to do next was to put a cut here, like a U-shaped cut here. And what I recognized is there wouldn't really be shape to push that shape that way. There wouldn't be space to push that shape that way because it would bump into that piece. So I could do it and maybe push that piece out. You know, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna try it. First I told myself I could do it because there wouldn't be space, and now I'm gonna figure out how to make space for it. And again, this is just seeing what happens. And this is where I'm going to give the plug for process over product. It's what I talk about all the time when I'm talking about visual thinking. And see there, I don't really love that that's actually that close together. We're going to figure it out. So process over product is really enjoying the process of making something. So and learning from the process of making something and not being so freaking caught up in the product, because we all have that inner critic, and we all have that inner critic that won't shut up. And so often you might be doing something like this, and the whole freaking time you're like, but this doesn't look right. This doesn't look like Brandy's. What's wrong with this? What's going on? I should actually cut in front of the camera. Useful process. And, you know, you end up having no fun because the whole thing felt like a failure. And it's like, why was that a failure? Like, there's no, again, this can end up looking like whatever this ends up looking like. Again, I have a lag in my camera. I'm not sure if this picked up, but this can look like whatever it ends up looking like. There isn't a right answer to this. So just want to give a shout out for separating the process from the product, and knowing that, you know, you can have some fun with the process itself and not freaking, you know, be so hard on yourself. And there's some stuff that just is better when it's more process focused, you know, like I was talking to friends this morning about sort of like when you get too caught up in the product side of something, usually it just means you're having a terrible experience, and you feel like, you know, whatever you made didn't kind of hold up to whatever standards you had in your mind or the standards that inner critic had. But there are times where, you know, like for my most experiences with visual thinking or visual arts, hand making visual kind of things, and that's kind of like when you work something so hard that it feels overworked. And I don't, it's kind of a hard to explain kind of thing, but that can happen where you just kind of work something so hard that it kind of squeezed out all the spontaneity. Like that's part of the thing of trying to make shapes like this that feel more spontaneous and feel like they have more energy in them. Like if I had made this all perfectly symmetrical, and if I had, you know, lined it up so there were the exact same amounts of space. So if I kind of hold this in place here, you can see if there was like the exact amount of space between each of these shapes, that's going to be kind of a stagnant graphic. That's not going to have the kind of energy of changing things around. So let's play with this and see what we got. So now I'm just taking my glue. It can be any kind of glue. I happen to use this tacky glue, which is nice and thick. And all I'm doing is flipping over to the back side and squeezing out some glue. Now this happens to be our archival. This kind of project, this could be truly just, this is something I'm doing to try something different. I got time at home. You may not care at all about the longevity of this thing, of this collage. If you are concerned about the longevity, just make sure that you are using archival materials. Even the frickin' pizza box we're using is an archival. So over time, this box is going to sort of yellow and age. But that's just a shout out that, just any kind of project, think about, definitely think about, are the materials you're using healthy? Meaning, you're not probably going to eat this stuff, but I want to make sure you're using stuff that isn't going to, trigger asthma or, give you a headache or any of those kind of things. So this is, definitely some safe materials I got going on here. So here you see I glued this piece second. So first, make sure it's healthy, like it's not going to endanger your health at all. And second, if you do want the piece to last, definitely look out for things that are more archival. So here you can see I put this first piece down and it's fairly even on the page and whatever, that's fine. Then this piece is relatively even right now. And again, there's nothing wrong with this, but because I've got this squishy glue that doesn't set up right away, what I can actually do is kind of play with what that shape does. So, here it looks a little, even just that little bit of movement I did makes it look a little bit more like a lid, on top of this shape. Or I could push it out farther, and now it almost feels like it's levitating off of this shape. So this is just the kind of, this is all abstract. These are just shapes. But it's interesting how, as you work with it, as you push things around, how much it changes the movement and the energy in the piece. And yes, if I've glued this piece down and I push it really far, I'll probably have some exposed glue on the page, which, depending on the glue, might look kind of shiny. Depending on the glue, it might look a little shiny. It's fine. Again, this is not, if you are concerned about that, just maybe play with the unglued shapes a little more so you know in your mind what you want your placement to be, and then glue it. But again, I'm just kind of demonstrating this on the fly because why the heck not? Why the heck not enjoy the process? And you know what? You may just enjoy the process of watching this video. I would super love it if you actually made one of these. And if you do, and you post it, please use the hashtag start with a shape. So instead of saying start with a circle or start with a triangle like it had in the book, just use hashtag start with a shape so we can find different examples. And you know what? Maybe nobody does this, or maybe people do it but they don't post it. That's fine too. Right now I'm just futzing with some glue between those spaces. It's not a big deal. So here you can see this shape I put down, and I just, brought it down just a little bit from this so they're not perfectly even. Again, that's just giving us a little bit more movement in this. And I'm just going to keep going. And that is the process. So again, I want, so process over product, definitely not getting too hung up, not letting that inner critic get too loud, right? So if the inner critic gets too loud, you're not going to have any fun whatsoever. You're not going to learn anything. And that's just, I know it's prevalent. I know we all have our inner critic that we, sometimes it actually takes the shape of a particular person. Sometimes it's just that voice in your head. Yeah. So now I'm just playing with what is the negative space. So what is that white space between these pieces? And again, no right answer. With creativity, this is one of those things where once upon a time I went to the Discovery Center in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Really lovely museum. It's a very interesting museum because it's like a little bit of natural history, some science and technology, some kind of more artistic stuff. And they had an exhibit about Les Paul, the guitar maker. And I walked into this exhibit, and the first thing I saw was this big old mural. What they'd done was blown up a picture of Les Paul as a kid. I think he might have been from Milwaukee, which is why they had the exhibit. Don't quote me on that, or fact check me and let me know in the comments. It was a giant photo of him as a kid, and it was like a bunch of kids, I think it was him in the photo, a whole bunch of kids standing there in a row, and superimposed on this frickin' mural, it said 1 in 8 people are creative. And and it was the first thing I saw, like the first exhibit we went into, the first thing I saw, and it just frickin' pissed me off, because that is not true. Yes, there are people who practice their creativity more, and yes, people have different types of creativity, but creativity is just making something new, and you could be making something new in countless ways. So here, I'm playing with this. I like that this particular line right here kind of actually perfectly closes that shape, but we're still going to disrupt that shape by putting that guy outside of it. So I'm just using this opportunity of that particular line to make it interesting, you know, kind of a more finished line. Our eye kind of completes that line because of the way I lined up that middle piece out of these 3 pieces. So, you know, I think the big issue is, I'm sure a lot of you who are watching this, whether you are an artist or not, whether you consider yourself creative or not, unfortunately, creativity gets the rap of, you know, only certain job titles get to be creative. And I do not believe that to be true. I think there's creativity in a whole lot of work. Yes, there is certain types of work where it is about doing the same thing the same way every time. And there might not be a lot of leeway for creativity in that particular role. That doesn't mean that person isn't creative in other aspects of their life. So yeah. So, and this is, it gets relegated to certain types of role. Usually it's sort of like, you know, I'm not the artist, or I'm not the writer, or I'm not the, whatever the kind of art form is. And one of my favorite things, I hope Darren doesn't mind me sharing this story about us, but my friend Darren is a dean of a dental school. And I remember years ago we were working on creating a graphic for a particular, it was some initiative they were doing in the school where they're trying to spread the word about this particular focus they had as a school. And we're just talking about, like, he had all these fantastic freaking ideas about what to do with this project, and he simply hired me to help give him more polished visuals. That was it, you know. But he was so freaking creative and such a great problem solver with the task at hand. He also happens to be somebody who loves doing underwater photography on his was it underwater? It's funny because my actual dentist also does the same thing. It may just be photography in general. But, you know, has that very creative hobby. So again, I just want to give a shout out for creativity in many forms. And so I don't want you watching this thinking only my kid can do this project, or I'm an accountant so I can't do this project. Nope, I don't want to hear it. You got a box, you got some paint, you got some scissors. I welcome you to do this project. At the moment, what I'm doing is I got some glue on my black shape, and I wanted to just kind of like rub it off so it didn't dry on my shape. And this is something that is an aspect of, it's an aspect of creativity. It's also a type of intelligence that I don't think gets enough credit, which is understanding materials. Like there's a whole wealth of information up here and in my body of how stuff behaves, how different materials behave. And it is, I take it for granted. I forget that there's, you know, the reason I can do this way and I'm not getting like so much on my hands, or I know that like I'm going to use this kind of glue to do this project. I know that, you know, I expected that this piece of cardboard underneath was actually going to curve. You know, those are just things I know from previous experience. We all rely on our previous experience to kind of anticipate what the next experience is going to be. But you know, this just happens to be a whole lot about physical materials and how they behave. And this particular case, because this isn't the type of object that's going to get like a lot of wear and tear, you can see, hopefully you can see here, I'm just putting like smushing some glue on it, on this piece of cardboard. It's not, it's not perfectly even. It's not going perfectly to the edges, because that's just not what I need for this particular project. There might be another project, for instance, like something like bookbinding. If I was doing bookbinding, I will want a very even coat of that glue, so that the paper, doesn't show wrinkles or bubbles, once that paper or that cloth has been glued to the cover of a book. So let's see. So I gotta contend with that corner. I'm gonna leave that for a second. So we're still gonna have that guy and that guy right about there. So let's work with this over here. And you can see what I'm doing is I'm working from the center and just building out. That is something I know from experience, that if I start from the middle, I'm less likely to run out of space, or kind of work myself in a corner. So that's the kind of stuff we get from experience. And, I teach visual thinking for a living, and I've spent years drawing for people in meetings. And so often, somebody comes up to me with their story and they'll say, I draw like a 7-year-old. And unfortunately, very, very sadly, they probably draw like a 7-year-old because that's when they stop drawing. So, why you're drawing, that person who stopped at 7, there is no expectation that, or there shouldn't be any expectation that that person's drawing skills are, at my level of somebody who never stopped drawing and did it for hours and hours and hours. So I just, there's this weird expectation that somehow we're supposed to be innately good at something. And yeah, I do think people have, things that they have aptitudes for. The story in my family goes that the first time my aunt brought me a coloring book and crayons, they kind of sat me down and didn't really tell me how to color. And I was drawing patterns. They said I was drawing plaid, which I find hard to believe, but but I was drawing patterns. And that just happens to be, something that my brain extra loves. And happily, it's something I can, use for fun and profit. But, yes, some people may have some aptitudes, but so much, honestly, I think, everything's learnable and everything's practicable. And the more you learn and the more you practice and the more you experience and build up those experiences, the better you're going to be at that particular thing. My favorite example of this is I like to talk about putting on eye makeup. There's no eye makeup here. I do not put makeup on my eyes. And the rare occasion I have, it looks insane. And that's because I got no freaking experience with it, right? So there you go. So now, again, I'm just playing with, and I know I'm not like giving you the blow by blow of every single choice here, but I'm just, playing around with the shapes. So here, it just happens that little, see how tiny that space is right there? That feels too crowded to me. That just feels like, I don't know, it's creating tension in the shapes that I don't want. So I'm just gonna, see how much that tiny little, so here it was here, and it just looked a little crowded. And now if I just go boop, like maybe a millimeter, now it that just changes what that shape looks like. And so here we've got, it's interesting. I still like that this feels like a little lid blowing off because there's more space here. You don't get exactly that same kind of thing in other places of the drawing or of the collage. It's not really a drawing. Whatever, you can call it a drawing if you want. I do not like to spend a whole lot of time worrying about definitions. Certainly shared language is helpful, but I'm not gonna keep myself up at night thinking, is this collage high art or not? All I know is I had a pizza box and I had some paint, or I had some ink in this case, and I made a thing. So that is, again, process over product. I actually was thinking, as I looked at the one I made this morning, I'm like, wow, imagine doing a whole bunch of these and just creating like a big gallery wall. I think that would be gorgeous. Again, we had a lag in the video, so if that didn't catch, I was thinking earlier today, if you had did a whole bunch of these and put them up in sort of a gallery wall, that would be freaking awesome, right? All right, so now we're going to get this weird space here with this guy and that guy. We'll see what happens. So I'm going to give it some extra space. And again, that's a pretty tight space right there between those two shapes. I'm just going to go out a tiny bit. And next I'm going to put in this little guy. And this probably is going to touch just because of the curve of this particular shape. And I'm just learning this through experience. So right now I'm putting a tiny bit of, I'm realizing I'm doing my gluing off camera, but I think you got the gist, right? So let's get that little piece. And yep, so that touches. It kind of looks like a mouth biting down on that kind of shape. I don't love it. I don't love it, but I'm trying to keep the integrity of not cutting it and changing it. So I could go out like that. So now it looks like, you know, it's a hand reaching for something, kind of. Could even look like, you know, spitting out something. And then perhaps what I do is I put that piece there. Not in love with that corner. That's okay. It's perfectly okay. So now I'm just going to finish this guy, but I'm going to think that the next time I make one of these, I don't want a shape that actually kind of folds in, gets narrower at the top, because it's going to create that kind of shape. You know, here we've got a nice open shape. You know, this shape's more open. You know, all the other shapes here are more open, but I'm learning from this experience that I don't want it to curve in too much, because otherwise we're going to get that kind of thing. And if you wanted that kind of thing, now you know that's how to get that kind of thing. But again, live and learn and enjoy the process. So let's just put in that little triangle there. What do I think? I'm gonna leave it. What I was just considering was maybe slicing it like this or this and having it go farther out, because maybe that would do something interesting, but I'm gonna let it go. I'm not gonna worry about it. I am going to play with that. Yeah, looks a little weird. You might be watching this thinking, well, it does look a little weird. You may be watching it and thinking, like, what is she seeing? What is the problem? But I'm realizing my little cover was in the way there on my camera. Process over product. And there you go. There is a collage using negative space, cutting from a solid shape and using the spaces between the shapes to do something interesting. And again, all you need, you could even use regular paper. Doesn't have to be a pizza box that's painted, but I wanted to use stuff that you very likely already have at home. Get creative, get resourceful, and no matter who you are, what kind of work you do for a living, if you're old enough to be working for a living, or young enough, or whatever, that we all have creativity. We all can be resourceful and creative and, you know, enjoy the process. So try it, right? Again, I would love to see it if you do make one of these collages. Here was the one from this morning, the bigger pizza box, and here's the one we just created. So if you do make one of these collages, I would love to see, if you post it on social media, I'd love to see you use the hashtag start with a shape. I think that's what I said earlier. So again, I'm Brandy Agerbeck of loosetooth.com. If you want to learn more about visual thinking from me, hop on over to loosetooth.com. But otherwise, you know, save those boxes, save those labels, make something out of something else. Ta-da!